Bill, thank you so much for visiting with us. And can you tell us a little bit about why the assessor's office exists and why it's of use to the citizens of Phelps County?
Sure. The Phelps County assessor, as all assessors in the state, are charged with inventorying and valuing all real estate and personal property for tax purposes. Its function for county government is to distribute the tax burden to the citizens on a equalized basis. And how the state has determined to equalize that is based on the value of the property that people own. So on a semi-annual basis, biannual basis, excuse me, we revalue all the real estate based on economic and market conditions. On an annual basis, we pick up all new construction to the real estate parcels, and then on an annual basis, we value all personal property reported by the citizens of Phelps County.
And in terms of how you do this, can you give us the thumbnail sketch of how you accomplish all these things?
Sure. Quickly, for personal property, people turn in a form or a list on an annual basis at the beginning of the year to declare what they own, and then we, according to the statutes, have to look at a particular price guide and assign a value based on that price guide. But for real estate, it's a little bit more complicated. We're constantly keeping track of transfers, deed transfers, and ownership changes through the administrative court or through the deed records. And we are assigning a value to the real estate based on general accepted appraisal techniques.
So you have staff here who have qualifications that would make them able to state that they are, shall we say, properly evaluated and certified appraisers?
I wouldn't say that they're licensed or certified appraisers. There's a much higher bar to be what's called a fee appraiser. That's through the licensure departments in the state. They go through various courses for that. We do have a continuing education program sponsored by the Missouri Association of Assessors, and we handle two classroom setting, like 32 to 40 hour classes a year, and I rotate my staff through that so that they can be trained in techniques of mass appraisal. Mass appraisal is a little different than the appraisal that you get for when you're buying or mortgaging your home.
What would a typical citizen want to come in and discuss with you or your staff?
Usually the value of their home and how that relates to other values of similar homes in the county. That's to make sure that they're being taxed on an equalized basis. They much less have to come in. We provide this information through our websites for them. On our statements that we send them individualized passwords so that they can view all of the assessment details. Pretty much everything that we house as far as their property assessments are available to them on the website. And we do make available a communication link so that if they find anything that they believe is incorrect, they can directly email our real estate staff and get that addressed. We have a little bit of a disadvantage as far as like a fee appraiser. When you go to sell your home or mortgage it, your mortgage company's hiring an appraiser to come out and value it. You're leading them through a walkthrough of your home and saying this is this, this is this. We have to do it all from the exterior. So there's a lot of assumptions that are made. So we have taken the policy in this office that not knowing what these details are on the inside, we're going to make that information available to the taxpayer. They're the ones that live in these homes. They'll know if we have something wrong. The best eyes for the inside of the house is the homeowner. So we try to be very transparent so that they can deal with us directly so that we have the best information.
Would there be a reason why a third party would want to come in and look at that information?
Sure.
And is that a legitimate thing for someone to do?
Yeah. Constantly, people are actually looking at the assessment records and our assessment details on the internet. If you've done a search on Trulia or Zillow or any of these websites, they acquire our assessment data under the Sunshine Law each year, and then they marry that data in with their sales data and whatever else that they've compiled. So you're actually seeing that data whenever you do a search. You could type in a particular address in the city of Rolla, and the first 4 or 5 results are going to be Zillow or Realtor.com or Redfin or any of these kind of regional realtor websites are, and they've married their multiple listing system data and our data together to kind of provide a better picture for the website consumer.
If a land surveyor has been asked to survey a piece of property, they may have obtained the deed, but they may need to look up adjoiners. They may need to find out about easements and a whole number of other things connected with the land. And my understanding is that you provide a lot of support to them through the tools that you now have.
Yes.
So can you walk us through some
Sure.
of those?
A little more on the transfer side and a little less on the easement side. We don't really keep track of easements in this office for tax purposes. Only if there was a blanket easement that would affect the value of a property would we look into it. But on a regular basis, we're keeping track of these ownership transfers, and we're entering the recording information of these transfers into our system, and that's populated on our website. So when you go to our GIS system online, it will show you the most recent document that's been recorded that has to do with that piece of property. But if you go further into our assessment website, it has a listing of all the details of all the transfers that we've recorded on each of the properties. So that can give kind of a rudimentary abstract of transfer information that could be valuable to the surveyor. Also, all of our layers, we have various zone. We don't have the city zoning, but we have political boundary lines, city lines, all of that kind of information that we've acquired over the years and maintained. We make that available on the GIS, and it's actually exportable on our GIS, including the aerial photography and oblique aerial photography information. As a subscriber, you can look at a particular area and export the GeoTIFF for that area directly right to your desktop without having to do anything.
So the surveyor could do this from the comfort of his or her office? Does it cost something to use this service?
Yeah, we have an annual subscription of $50 a year. And the target price, how we came up with that, is we want it to pay for itself to provide this information on the internet. It's not under my mandate to provide this stuff on the internet. Obviously, under the Sunshine Law, I have to provide access to the information, but I like to make it as accessible as possible to all those interested. But I don't want it to be a burden to the office for something that's not under the mandate. So there's a certain amount of money that it costs to host this information and pay for the third-party providers to provide these websites. And I know about a certain amount of subscribers they're going to be, and it's just a simple math equation to figure out what the annual subscription is so that it pays for itself. It's not as just one-sided, us providing information to the surveyor. We use a lot of information from every survey that we can get our hands on to make our information more reliable to the public. And this was prior to my administration, when the county set up its GIS system, they had originally bid a certain number of control points or like corners of townships to be surveyed so that you could set up the overall architecture of the GIS in an accurate manner. Well, when they got the bids back, it was a lot higher than they expected. So instead of doing all the township corners, they did, a handful of them. So there's a lot of theoretical lines in our section and township lines where, as we acquire access to surveys where a monument has been discovered and evidenced in their survey, we will take that information and adjust our lines on our GIS. And it's a lot of rubber sheeting is what we call, because once you make a change, because unlike a survey, all the boundary lines have to match up on ours. We don't show overlaps because our job is to inventory. So there should be one taxpayer for each little piece of land. So when we change a section line, it may change 30, 40 parcels. So we like when surveyors share information with us. It just makes our information more accurate.
Do you do this by on a collaborative, voluntary basis, or do you have some kind of a mandate to be able to demand the production of that information to you?
There may exist some sort of mandate, but we try not to operate in that way in this office. We have a very collaborative community here. I'm on a first name basis with most surveyors that are in the county, and we have kind of a shared resources mentality. We're all trying to do the best for what we do, and so we try to help each other in that. You know, a surveyor calls up and asks for any kind of resource that we have, we'll provide that to them within constraints of our license agreements. We do have a license agreement with our aerial photography provider that if it's to a non-governmental use, we have to have a waiver signed by our aerial photography company to provide aerial photography. That being said, if, like I said earlier, they extract the information directly from our website hosting, they can avoid that. So as long as it's not like a municipal-wide extraction, they can pretty much get what they want right out of our web offering.
So the surveyors send you copies of their surveys? Is that how they deliver the data to you?
A lot of times they're recorded with the recorder, and that's how we access them. But other times you can read a legal description, at least in this area. I know it's depends on the area how things are done, but in this area the survey information is usually left at the end of the legal description. So, or sometimes we've gotten familiar enough with the various surveyors, I can read a legal description and probably tell you which survey company made that survey, and we'll just give them a call, and if we have a question about something or something they can help us on, we talk to them, and they're usually very helpful. So.
Well, this particular discussion actually leads to something that's controversial among a point of controversy among surveyors, and that is that we have many landowners who look at the assessor's database and say, this is not right, your survey doesn't match up with what the assessor says, so I'm not going to pay you for your surveyor's fees. I'm sure you run into this kind of a situation where where you cannot take a survey and directly overlay it on your map because you make certain assumptions to make your, essentially what you're doing is creating a county atlas with your GIS, which, and a survey may turn up a more accurate rendering of what the tract really looks like. Do you run into that situation?
Not as often in the context of where they're questioning the surveyor. They're usually questioning their assessment. They're usually saying, this is what my survey says, and to be honest, for them to access our online GIS, they have to look at a disclaimer where we set exactly what you said there, that we make a lot of assumptions. It's by no means a substitute for an accurate land survey by a licensed surveyor in the state of Missouri. We try to tell anyone that comes in that I always recommend, and this comes from, I'm a former title insurance agent and abstractor, so the value of a survey is not lost upon me. But just like I would say anecdotally, people tend to try to handle their transactions with the least amount of cost, to say it nicely. They don't seem to value the services of an attorney or a surveyor as much as they should. A lot of transactions go without the expertise of either one of those types of professionals, which I think they should. But we've become accustomed to just relying on non-professionals to give us this information. But I haven't run into a lot of situations where they would get a survey and they would say, at least from my end, maybe they're getting it from the surveyor, but we would always defer to a survey because, I mean, most of our GIS is theoretical, And we say that, but you know how people are with online disclaimers. They just look for the OK button and they don't even read it. So it's difficult to assume that they're reading that, but we always make it apparent in our office that we would defer to a survey just because of the amount of monumenting and techniques that they use. We also say that, you know, when we get our aerial photography, we're not using ground control. So there's a lot of error that can occur just based on that. And a lot of our lines are based on the aerial, so we want it to match up when it goes along a right of way. If it skews to one end or the other, it just doesn't look good. So we try to make everything fit. So I would absolutely say you could not take a survey and overlay it. I would say probably you couldn't necessarily take two different surveyors' survey of the same property and get the exact measurements just because of the technique, and maybe the precision that they use in their measurements. But I would always tell a taxpayer, believe your surveyor. Don't, you know, we always tell them our lines could be off as much as 6 to 7 feet either direction, and that's a lot of error when you're trying to discern whether your survey is right.
So it sounds like the real problem is that because they want to, the landowners want to do things as inexpensively as possible, they go to the assessor's record as the court of first resort, especially when they're involved in disputes with other parties, whether it's an adjoiner or somebody wanting to come through with a utility or something like that.
No, I would agree with that. There seems to be a mentality, and this is anecdotal, obviously a blanket statement by me, but from my experience, you can put all the disclaimers on the GIS website that you want, that they will or will not read, but the minute that they see that the assessor says this is where the line is, that's somehow official for them.
Right.
You know, even though ours is for inventorying purposes only.
Right. So I think surveyors can relate to this because very often they are asked to provide an estimate for surveying land, which is not an engineering proposition, it's art and science. So very often the surveyor will provide a range, and could be a fairly wide range, but the landowner goes home remembering only the lowest number.
Sure, absolutely. And I would agree, and I would say, I don't know how many of our surveyors utilize it, but if they were subscribers to our GIS system, I would think that, you know, being a layperson and not being in that business, I have probably a skewed idea of how they estimate their bids, but I think that they could utilize our GIS system to assist in that. That we have topographic lines, contour lines that overlay. We also have oblique imagery, so they could look at their parcel and determine kind of in a three-dimensional way what they have to deal with terrain-wise, and maybe you give a more refined range than they would have, saying, oh, I know that's out in the country. It could be up anywhere from here to here, depending on how many setups we have or however it's done. But I would hope that our system could help in determining that, or at least fine-tuning it a little bit, because I'm sure that is exactly what the customer does, is remembers the lowest number.